How to do, not do. First, let's go into what exactly do I mean by that. What is it? How to do, not do. I'm not saying how to do and not do, because if you have do and not do, when you do, you're essentially not doing. And when you not do, you're essentially not doing, right? So how to do, not do is kind of like an amalgamation of both doing, not doing, and it kind of combines into each other in a weird way. Essentially, it's a contradiction, right? It's a contradiction. So how to perform a contradiction? And right now you may ask yourself, okay, so why would I need to know this? Why are contradictions important? When in life is this gonna be useful? And why would it make sense, right? But if you use your imagination a little bit, you'll find out that sometimes life requires you to perform a contradiction, right? So, for example, or sometimes there's questions in life that require a contradictive answer. Like, for example, a famous question: when a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, somebody might say, well, it does and it doesn't, right? It does and it doesn't. That's kind of a contradictive answer. That's a case in which the answer wouldn't really make sense, right? Or like when you're in a relationship and your girlfriend or boyfriend, like they want to leave you, but they want you to go away, but they also want you to stay, right? How do you go about doing that? It's contradictory, yes. So in many things in life, and how you can probably think of more examples, like when you go out and about in your way. Now that you have this concept, you'll probably notice it a lot more. But the important thing is that you notice that there's things in life that require contradictions, that require you to perform a contradiction, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. How to do, not do. Sometimes our own desires themselves are contradictory. And the reason why we can't figure them out is because a lot of times, because we don't have the philosophical conception of this to be able to analyze them and get through them and actually answer them. So frowning at your sadness will not make you happy. Mad dogging your anger will not make it go away, will not scare it away. So, and if you notice here, sometimes our response to our own emotions doesn't fix the situation, but it worsens it. Like frowning at your sadness, right? You're frowning, which makes you sad about your sadness, or you're mad dogging your anger. Now you're no longer just angry, but you're angry about being angry. And you could add even more layers to that. You get angry about being angry, and so it continues, right? So sometimes what you do doesn't make sense, and that's why it's important to know how to perform a contradictory statement. So, how to do, not do, right? And so what essentially it is that a contradictory statement, what it is something like this. You have A and you have B. And contradictory statements do something like this. They push against each other, right? They push against each other. And it's kind of like, if you've heard of superposition, right? Something that's this and it's also something else and it's also that. Something that is and it also isn't. So there's two things in one space. Superposition, and things that are superimposed. Also, like maybe something that is moving and staying at the same place at the same time. That's also contradictory. So when you have A and B, they seem like they're pushing against each other. And in order to solve this contradiction, a lot of times what you need, so they're pushing against each other, A lot of times what you need to solve it is an extra dimension. And when you get that extra dimension, you'll see that they're not actually pushing against each other, but they are actually fitting in together, but within that extra dimension, right? So in order to solve a contradiction, what you need is an extra dimension. For example, the superimposed things, right? So this is item A, item B. They seem like they would take up the same space. If you know geometry, they seem like they would take up the same space, but when you look through the other dimension, they're actually not, right? They actually have their own space. If you lived in a world that was only 2 dimensions, it would definitely seem like they're taking up the same space. Or something that's moving and not moving. So moving and not moving, if you know geometry, imagine a number line from 0 to 4. So there's 0, 1, 2, 3. And there's a point in position 1, right? There's a point that's not moving, it stays in position 1, but it's also moving, right? So how do you define that? How do you figure that out? How is it moving? How is it not moving? It's not moving because it's staying at 1, but it's also moving because it's moving back and forth, right? And the only way in which that could be possible is if you add the extra dimension of depth. That way it could stay at 1, but also move in another dimension. So a lot of times, and I'd go as far as to say as that every time there's a contradiction, it essentially means there's an extra dimension to the matter that if you look into the extra dimension, it'll expand a contradiction in a way that it'll make sense. So let me take you to the question, to the statement that inspired this investigation in the first place. And that original statement was, I want to wake up. And, or the question, the thing that requires an answer is how to wake up. I'm giving instructions of how to wake up. Now, by waking up, I mean like, waking up means like a state of enlightenment, a state of being in complete peace with everything, with all states, with whether it's good or whether it's bad, happiness, sadness, anger, elusiveness, confusion, being at peace with all of that. Now, I don't mean like some opioid engorgement in which you're completely satisfied. No, it's kind of like being complete and being content and aware of everything around you. So that's what I mean by waking up. And the original question was, how do I wake up? Right? So this was the original question. And as I go through this, the reason I want to go through this is primarily to show the process, the redefinition that I went through, the shifting of the meanings that I went through in order to solve this puzzle of how to perform a contradiction, right? So the original question was how to wake up, right? And by defining waking up as being at peace, wanting is essentially a state in which you're not awake. So the first answer to how to wake up would be, well, by not wanting it, by not wanting to wake up. And so the second part, or my second person will say, okay, so how do I stop wanting? And my first person will say, well, let's see, how do you stop wanting? Well, wanting means that you're not allowing something. So maybe if you just let it go, allow it, so allow it. And then my second person will say, well, okay, so I'm trying to allow it. So how do you allow it? What goes into allowing it? How do I do that? And so my first person will say, well, I guess you just stop. Just feel everything without moving, without having an intention. And then my second person will say, okay, well, how do I stop? How do I mean, because you can stop your body, right? You can stop moving completely. But there's always an intention inside of you, whether it's mental or whether it's emotional, that's kind of wanting to move, like pressing out, right? And my second person will say, how do you stop all the way inside? And so my first person will think of an answer. He'll say, let's see. Well, I guess, I mean, the only reason why you have those movements, those emotional intentions, is because you care. So I guess maybe if you stop caring, so try to stop caring. So then my second person will say, okay, well, how do you stop caring? Then my first person will say, you care. Well, just stop trying. Stop trying, because when you try is because you care. So stop trying to wake up. And my second person will say, okay, well, how do I stop trying? My first person will say, okay, well, the reason why you're trying is because you have a goal. You have a goal So maybe if you remove all goals, then you'll have nothing to try towards, so you'll stop trying. So remove all goals. Then my second person will say, well, how do I remove all goals? And my first person will try to think of an answer. It's like, well, you see, when you ask that question, you have a goal, because your goal is to remove all goals. Because you want to get rid of your goals, you're asking that question, right? So I guess the way that you do this is by not asking the question. Stop asking the question. And so my second person will say, well, how do I stop asking this question? And it is in this question that you see the contradiction in itself. Because by asking this question, by asking, how do I stop asking this question, you're already failing at what you're looking for. If you didn't ask that question, you would accomplish it. But because you asked that question, because you want to figure it out, you're already failing to do what you want to do. How do I stop asking this question? That is the contradictory question. And so to analyze this, let's go back to the previous question, to the second last question. How do I stop having goals? The funny thing about this question is that you have a goal to not have goals. But it's not just what's wrong in asking that question, there's also something wrong in answering that question. Because if I tell you a way to not have goals, then I'm basically giving you instruction. I'm giving you a goal. And every time I answer your question, I'm renewing your investigation, which makes you ask another question, right? So it kind of works like this. It kind of works like that joke that middle school and elementary school kids do on each other back when homosexuality wasn't a trend. They ask you, are you gay? And you say, no, I'm not gay. You know, being like a heterosexual, non-homophobic, normal being, you say, no, I'm not gay. Then they ask you, does your mom know you're gay? And whether you answer yes or no, the implication is there. You are gay. So if you say yes, she knows I'm gay, then you're gay. But if you say no, she doesn't know that I'm gay, then you should tell her, right? So the funny thing here is that when they ask you, does your mom know you're gay? That's kind of like two statements. It's the statement implied in another. It's saying, if you separate that, if you dissect that, it says, you are gay, does your mom know this? Right? So by answering their question, you're playing into their frame, right? You're already agreeing with what they say. You're acknowledging and agreeing with their frame that you are gay, right? The same way is this. How do I wake up? When a person asks this, it is implying that they are not awake. And if you give them instruction, if you tell them this is how you wake up, you're also playing into their frame and telling them you are not awake. All right, so back to the question. The question is, how do I stop asking this question? How do I get rid of goals? How do I get rid of goals? And if we translate that, we could kind of like dissect and analyze this. Let's translate that to something we could work with better. How do I get rid of instruction? Instead of a question, I'll put a statement. So instruct me to get rid of instruction, right? So instruct me to get rid of instruction. Instruct me to get rid of instruction is kind of a long phrase, so let's simplify it and say, instead of to get rid of instruction, let's just say no instruction. Okay, so let's bring this down, and the new phrase is instruct me, no instruction. Okay, now no instruction is a negative statement, so that's kind of hard to visualize. So we have to turn it into a positive statement. So no instruction is a negative statement, and yes, we do have to fix that. You cannot visualize a negative statement. If you want to try, let's try no swimming, for example. Can you visualize a person not swimming? Go ahead and do that now. So when you visualize this person not swimming, what are they doing? Are they standing? Are they lying down? Are they walking? Are they sitting? Are they floating? Well, you're not visualizing the person not swimming. You're visualizing the person floating. You're visualizing the person standing. You're visualizing the person sitting, You know, so you cannot visualize not swimming doesn't look like anything. Or does not swimming look like a person swimming and with a circle and an X marked through it? Then that's not swimming. That's a person swimming with a circle and an X marked through it, right? So whenever you have a negative statement, you have to fix it to something you can actually visualize, right? So no instruction is something that you have to think of a positive statement to kind of replace that negative statement. So into something that you can actually visualize, that your mind can actually comprehend. All right, so instruction is no instruction is a negative statement, so we have to turn it into a positive statement. And so when you visualize no instruction in your mind, what do you see? So no instruction, what does that look like? It looks like you're okay. It looks like you're done. It looks like you're complete. So instead of no instruction, we're going to turn it into a positive statement and say complete or done, right? So instruct me to be done. Instruct me to be complete. So let's play around a little bit with the phrase instruct me here. Kind of shift from the second person to the first person. So instruct me, if an appropriate response to that, like if you decide to instruct them, it would be you telling them what to do. So it's a command, right? So you tell them be complete. Be complete. So now you're giving the instruction, be complete. Be complete, be done. Okay? So let's look at be. When you tell somebody to be or to do or to be something, you're giving them a command, right? And a command essentially implies that they are not doing what you're telling them to do, which is why you're telling them to do it, right? So when you say be complete, you're actually deeming them incomplete. So you're essentially, so the deem, you are saying you are not complete. By telling them be complete, you are deeming them not complete. Got it? So, you are not complete. When you're saying you're not complete, when you're saying be complete, when you give them an instruction to be complete, you're playing into their frame that they're not complete. And you're reinforcing that belief that they're not complete. Right? So what do? When at first you tell them not complete? In order to fix this, when you answer their question, you're playing into their frame, right? So what can you do there? And this is where the do not do comes in. You have to perform a contradiction. You have to perform something that is uncategorized, outside of the nature of what they're asking, outside of the nature of their world, right? And you have to give them something. You have to give them an answer. Not answer their question, because by answering their question, you play it into their frame. So you're not answering their question, you're not giving them instruction, but you're also not ignoring them. You're also not saying no. You have to do this. You have to step out and dismiss the legitimacy of their question. Dismiss the legitimacy of their frame. Step out. That's like stepping out of their dimension, adding an extra dimension to it and stepping out of it. So kind of like the question, does your mom know you're gay? Right? You don't answer with yes. You don't answer with no. You just look at the statement. The question implies you are gay. And instead of answering their question, you dismiss the legitimacy of the question by not answering it first, but then you also correct their frame. You say, I'm not gay. So that's the correct response. If you ever get caught in trouble like that again, now you know the response and just say, I'm not gay. You kind of correct their frame, right? So you do the same thing here. Instead of saying you are not complete, you step out of their frame and dismiss the legitimacy of their question. And your answer will be, you make it into a positive deem. And you tell them, instead of saying you are not done by telling them what to do, you say you are done. And that's how you dissect it and get rid of the negativity in the statements, in the answer that you give them. You are done. So that is the answer. But how do you apply this answer? And well, something that you have to keep in mind is that the world is bigger than the words. The words are only referring to the world, right? So when you ask the question, how do I stop asking this question? You are not just, the words are not just are not the only question. The words are indicating, even before you articulate them, there's this feeling of unsettled discontent, that the question, that the words that come out of your mouth, they're referring to that feeling. And it is this feeling of incompleteness that inspires that question. What does this mean? It also means that any desire, whether it's I want, or I should, or I feel, it implies some sort of incompleteness. I want implies incompleteness because you're implying that without this, you are discontent. Or I should, you're implying that if you don't do that, you're not appropriate or you're incomplete. So when you're asking the question, how do I become enlightened? How do I wake up? How do I stop asking this question? And this could also apply to religious questions as well. When you're asking those questions, when you're wanting something, it comes from those questions, and those statements are inspired by a feeling of incompleteness. So let's go back to the original statement. I want to wake up. All right, so as I've said before, waking up means being okay with everything, being okay with good, bad, happiness, sadness. This means being okay with want. So if awakening means being okay with want, then satisfying your desire is essentially falling asleep, which would be the opposite of waking up. So basically, if you get what you want, you're failing to embody that which you aim to accomplish. So this is a contradictory statement. So in order to see this more explicitly, let's change up wake up, and let's just say I want to want. Right? So I want to want. And you can see here you can directly, more explicitly see here the contradictory nature of this statement, because if you satisfy your desire, you're no longer wanting, and you're no longer doing that which you want to do. And if you don't satisfy your desire, then you still want that thing, right? So, but the answer that I'm giving you is, I'm not giving you what you want, and I'm not ignoring your desire, but I'm giving you something of another nature. I'm giving you something that alters the paradigm altogether. So the statement that I'm not telling you, I'm not giving you what you want, but I'm telling you, you already have what you want. You were done all along.